Rick Eisenberg from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty is standing by on the Homesteader Store hotline. Rick, I almost think that maybe we should just kind of walk people through what actually is happening with regard to the Law Forward lawsuit, so that they have an idea of how radical this attack on the district maps really is. Dewey Strobel put out a piece that really, I think, shocked people, that part of the claim and part of the demand in this lawsuit is that 17 state Senate districts or 17 state Senate elections be declared null and void and new elections be called in 2024, when, of course, that's only halfway through the senator's term. So let's kind of walk people through how kind of bizarre this is.
Okay, well, it was about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, that the Supreme Court approved a set of maps after litigation in a case called Johnson that Will actually brought. And the maps were in place. They were used in the 2022 election, and we elected assembly members and we elected those senators who were up for office then. The composition of the court has now changed, and a couple of different plaintiff groups, Law Forward represents one, have gone to court, and they want to ask the court to essentially reverse what they did in Johnson. In Johnson, the majority of the court said they were going to consider the expected partisan outcome of the maps that were in place, that were submitted. They were going to look for maps that made the least changes from those that were adopted in 2011, and there was some procedural folderol and back to the United States Supreme Court and down again, but the maps were approved. So it's very extraordinary to look at this 2 years later. Nothing has really changed. There's no new information. The only thing that's different is the composition of the court. And so what they're doing is they're not only asking that the maps be changed going forward, but they're asking that the court declare that because the existing maps that the court drew or approved in 2022 are unconstitutional, that those senators who were elected to them in 2022, elected to represent the districts that were drawn by those maps, and who still have 2 years to go in their term, have to stand for re-election again under presumably newly drawn maps.
Okay.
That's not something that we saw when the maps were challenged after the 2011 redistricting.
So they they don't have any new arguments, or do they have a new argument? Is there anything new in this case from the last case brought 2 years ago?
Well, the only argument they make that they didn't make then, which is a little bit of a red herring, is that there are a number of districts in which you have a municipal island. So there are some municipalities in the state that aren't contiguous. That is, there's a city, and part of the city is maybe a mile or two away, or 6 blocks away, or whatever it is, and but there's some other municipality that cuts in between. And
yes.
Contiguous. And so, and that is not something that the Republicans did. That was something that got into the maps when they were being drawn by federal courts. It was thought to be okay because the Constitution says that you shouldn't split those municipal boundaries unless you have to. And they're challenging that, but it's a bit of a red herring because the advantage that they claim Republicans have, in which they challenge, isn't really a function of those non-contiguous municipal islands. But this is just another argument that they can make so that they can say that something is new. But I don't think anything is new that really affects the issues in this case. And the issue in the case is this. The Republicans have a natural geographic advantage. Their voters are less highly concentrated than Democrats. So if you drew maps and you had no idea who Republicans and Democrats were, you would probably wind up with a map that favored Republicans. But the Democrats say, no, that's true, but they favor the Republicans too much. and therefore it's unconstitutional because the advantage that they have somehow exceeds this natural advantage they would have.
So the 2011, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the maps after the nonpartisan redistricting took place, Republicans ended up winning in areas where Democrats would have ordinarily been expected to win. So in Democrat area voting patterns shifted to favor policies that were more supported by Republicans. And somehow nobody ever thought about that geographic advantage that Republicans have when they were crafting their campaign arguments going forward, because it was the issues that changed people's voting patterns, not the maps.
Well, there has been a change in voting patterns. I mean, partisan voters have become more concentrated. That's one thing that's happened. But secondly, particularly since there's been this populist turn in the Republican Party, there has been a little bit of reallocation. So, for example, I live in Mequon, a suburb along the lake outside Milwaukee. When these 2011 maps were drawn, that was considered to be a deeply red area. We had expected always to vote Republican, and now it's purple. And you can point to other parts of the state, particularly in rural areas, which have become redder since 2011. So these things are always changing. And the United States Supreme Court has entertained, they've heard cases like this, and they came to the conclusion, and this is not something that a recent conservative majority did. For 50 years, they have never been able to figure out how much of an advantage for one party is too much. And so finally, in 2019, in a case called Ruscio out of North Carolina, they said, that's it, we're done with these. This is an inherently political task to draw a map. This is why the Constitution gives it to the legislature. And we have no way of determining how much partisan advantage is too much. We have no way of disentangling natural geographic advantages from advantages that are thought to be unfair. And so we're not even going to hear claims like this.
Yeah, here we are again with the umpteenth case on district maps. So the Supreme Court has said that. And yet here we are again with Democrats wanting to cancel 17 Senate elections, create new maps that pit existing Republican senators against each other, by the way. And, even though asked and answered, and now you've got, and I think we've got proof that it's partisan because you had Voss attempt to give the Democrats what they claimed they wanted, which was a nonpartisan, bipartisan maps drawing commission.
Well, that's right. I mean, so what Voss did, and you can agree or disagree with what he did, but he said, look, I understand that the composition of the court has changed, and we could lose this case because the Wisconsin Supreme Court can adopt a different rule than the U.S. Supreme Court on legislative maps, and we can indulge in the fantasy that they'll think of some way to disentangle all these difficult issues that the Supreme Court has been unable to think of for 50 years. But Voss is, I think, a realist. He says that they might do that. So here's what we'll do. We'll have nonpartisan redistricting. This is what you've, as you pointed out, this is what you've said you wanted for a long, long time. And now the answer is, well, no, we won't go along with that. And I think a lot of the objections that are raised are a bit disingenuous. They say, well, look, the problem with Voss's plan is the legislature still has to approve the maps. Well, I'm sorry, but that's in the Wisconsin Constitution. There's no way that we can dispense with that unless we amend the Constitution. And so I do think that you're right, that some people are showing their true colors here, that it's not fair maps they want, it's maps that are themselves gerrymandered to make up for this natural geographic disadvantage that Democratic candidates.
I think the reason, probably the reason why Voss chose to pull that as a piece of legislation was to give the Democrats the ability to either stay true to what they said or be exposed as the liars they are. And I think we have an answer to that, since apparently now we don't care about fair maps. We only care about ways to take Republicans out of power in Wisconsin. What is your sense of the ability of the majority on this court to get very creative with logic?
Well, look, I mean, clever people will draw maps that the problem here is, the Democrats are arguing that the Republicans kind of over-egged the pudding. Yeah, they have a natural advantage, but they drew the maps so they would have a really greater advantage of that, and maybe they did. I mean, I always assume that politicians try to do something that will benefit them. And similarly, I think that the people who are trying to get these maps changed will present the court with maps that have been cleverly drawn to do away with this natural disadvantage. But I think that the court has to be very, very careful here, because you have a situation where that justice who is now the deciding vote said some things which I think can reasonably be assumed as prejudging the case. And if they come back with a set of maps that are tilted now in favor of Democrats, not even if you think that the old maps were tilted in favor of Republicans, I think that there's going to be a great deal of discord in the state. And I think that I think Voss offered them an off-ramp. It doesn't look like they're going to take it. That's unfortunate.
And the next round of Supreme Court elections will be the highest stakes ones yet. Thank you, Rick, for joining me on the program today. As always, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.